As Eric mentioned, my name is Vicka Bell Robinson, and I currently serve as an Associate Director in the Office of Residence Life at Miami University, and I've been involved with GLCUHO for a long time. And so I know that today you're here to listen a little bit about the kinds of things that those of us on the panel considered as we were putting together our presentations. We are all previous top 10 award winners, and so I'm happy and feel privileged to be a part of this esteemed panel. So I have just a few quick things. Just to give you a little bit of an understanding, my most recent program was on financial planning and financial management. That's the most recent one that I presented on that was an award winner. I've also done two others, one on being in small schools and one on, I was on a panel about life stories, and so I was there too. So this kind of goes to my first point. You should talk about what you know about. And so I think sometimes we feel sort of a pressure to like, oh, well, you know, what isn't anybody else doing, or what kinds of other topics might I cover? Think about what you're actually experiencing in your real life and talk about that. That in and of itself is interesting and fascinating. I've been to a number of sessions where people have just kind of come in and talked about what's going on in their school. I can remember one that Deb did with Henry class a few years ago about working with millennials, and like that was super impactful for me, and they were just kind of talking about their lives. And so don't be afraid to talk about what you know about. Now, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't do any research. So you don't know everything. So fill in the gaps of things that you don't know, but talk about what you know about. Care about your topic. Don't present on something just because you think it would be chic or cool. Care about what you're actually talking about. I cared about being a woman. I cared about financial management. I cared about helping people be successful in small school environments. And so care about your topic. If you're presenting on something that you don't really care about, it's going to show. So care about what you talk about. Practice presenting to colleagues or students. I think whether it's like in a formal, like, okay, I want to do a pre-session before I go to GLCUHO, or if it's a topic that you've done during RE training or some sort of other professional development, doing the presentation before you get to GLCUHO is a great idea. People will be able to point out things. You'll learn as a presenter what works, what doesn't work, if you like the flow, if you like the order. So doing that is always good. Be sure to have various forms of presentation styles. Include things like reflection, small group work, large group discussion. Generally, people don't want to be lectured at, and so to the extent that you can have them engage in the session is really super helpful. And then don't depend on technology too much. So anything can happen. Your projector bulb could go out. You could not have a projector. Your screen could not show up. The wireless might not work. Any of those things can happen. So make sure that you're prepared not only to present. I think using technology is a great idea, but you have to be prepared to go without it in the event that something happens. So keep that in mind. Have most of the answers, but don't worry about having all of the answers. You know, we're privileged to be in a field where people are really genuinely interested in learning and growing and developing, and they've also had their own experiences. So if somebody asks you a question that you don't know the answer to, engage in that conversation. Don't be afraid to engage in a conversation and to sort of expose what you don't know, because you haven't, you know, lived everywhere and done everything. And so there might be things that you don't know. Don't be afraid to be vulnerable in that. Do what you say you're going to do. So one of the things that I think people get really frustrated at in GLCUHO or in conferences in general for program presentations is when they read the description and then they go to the session and they don't match. And I get it. Like, you turn in a program proposal in May or June, and then the program's not until November, and you've lived life. Things change. How you feel about things change. But you really need to stick to the stuff that you submitted as much as possible. It's really frustrating for people who are attending programs to think they're getting one thing and to end up not getting that because something has changed between the time of the proposal and the time of the actual presentation. Don't exaggerate your learning outcomes. Don't try to use big fancy words, things that, like, if you have to pull out a dictionary to write your learning outcomes, then it's probably not the world's best learning outcome, and you probably don't know as much as you know about as much as you think about what you're trying to convey. So convey it in your own words, convey it in your own understanding. Don't exaggerate it. You know, participants will learn how to solve campus vandalism. Would be an exaggerated learning outcome. I mean, if you have the answer to that, then you should probably be writing books. But so be realistic in the learning outcomes that your folks are going to get out of the session. plan enough but not too much. So I've been in some sessions before where I've been in both kinds, right? Like sessions where the presenter thinks that everybody's going to talk way more than they do, and so then our session goes 35 minutes instead of 50 or instead of 60 minutes, which means at that point the people who are in attendance can't pick anything else to go to, so they're just kind of hanging out for half an hour, and that can be really frustrating. I've also been in sessions where it's like a run all the way through, and there's no time for reflection or thought or small group discussion. So make sure that you're really situating the amount of your information in the amount of time that is scheduled. People want to walk away with something they can use rather soon. So if I have to go back and convene a committee and do this and do that, that's less tangible than if I can like take a resource and try to implement it. So make sure your audience is walking away with something is really good. I remember I already referred to Deb's presentation. I remember a list of books that I could use right away. I could go back and get right away. I could look up while I was at the conference and try to get, and it's just in order to enhance my own knowledge. Read the room and understand your audience. So in particular with GLCUHO, there's a lot of people that could be in the room. You could have a lot of people who are right out of graduate school. You could also have senior housing officers. You could have mid-level managers that range from anywhere to 3 years in post-grad to 7 or 8 years post-grad. And so try to read the room. I say that, but I hesitate. I don't encourage you to go through and see where everybody is. That takes really valuable time out of your presentation, and so those minutes are better spent on the actual presentation. But if you can just kind of get a sense of like raise your hands or whatever, but going person by person, I've been in sessions where people have done that, and it takes a lot of time. So I wouldn't recommend that you do that, but just try to get a sense of who's in the room. And then make sure that you leave time for questions, because people will have them. You've given them information, they're taking it all in, and there will be a need for questions. So making sure that you leave time for questions is something important to do. That goes back to the plan enough but not too much. If there's no time for your audience members to ask questions or to dialogue about the topic, then you probably planned too much, and they're not going to be able to get as in-depth as you want them to or as they want to. That's the end of my slide. So thanks for listening. I look forward to your questions.
Okay, great. Thanks, Vicka. I'm going to now change the presenter here. So bear with me for just one moment while I send things over to Tiffany's screen.
Hi, this is Deb. So this might be Tiffany's screen, but it's Deb sitting in Tiffany's office with her. We just decided we'd sit in the same space so we could make faces at each other while others are speaking. The other thing that you probably need to know about me is that I like to have audience feedback, and because I can't see your faces, I make some assumptions that you're nodding along with me and saying, oh, good, those are really great points. Because if I thought you were sitting there bored and I was reading the audience that way, as Vicka spoke about, it would be difficult for me to just talk to this computer screen. So I kind of broke my remarks up into 3 different sections. Topic, preparation, and submission. Over the last, 10 years-ish at GLCUHO, I have probably received 9 top 10 program awards. And I don't think that that is always a result of something that I've done. So one of the things that I would tell you is to really think about whether you want to have a co-presenter. If you are an entry level, what you would consider a younger professional, many of the reasons that I presented were because entry level or less seasoned professionals reached out to me and said, Deb, would you be willing to submit a program proposal with me? And I can tell you there are very few directors who wouldn't be delighted to do that. We feel so strongly about our participation in our professional associations, and we want others to enjoy that as much as we do. So if you were to come in my office and look at the awards, you would see that the majority of them, in fact, I'm pretty sure every single one was done as a co-presentation, and usually because someone else reached out to me and said, Deb, would you be interested in doing that? So consider that. Vicka talked a little bit about talk about something that you know, talk about something that you care about. I do think it's okay to think about what do you want to know more about, because the things that you're going to want to know more about are the things that you're really interested in. So spend some time thinking about if you have, for example, if you don't have a res curriculum on your campus and that's something you really want to know about because you think it might work at your campus, that's an appropriate topic that you might want to present on. Think about whether you think someone else is interested in that topic as well. Are there questions that keep coming up in all the conversations you have with your professional colleagues around the country? Are there themes that you're hearing? Is everyone talking about Title IX? Is everyone talking about compliance? Is everyone talking about budget cuts? Is everyone talking about X, Y, or Z? Think about those as topics, and think about them as sort of the hot topics that might be happening. And then just think about, is there any information you have recently learned that you found extraordinary? I've often toyed with doing a presentation that is just simply called the top 10 things I learned in the last week from NPR. I'm a huge public radio fan, and I think every single week I learn things that can be helpful to me in the work that I do, and I often think that would be a really great program proposal. So if anyone wants to co-present this year and wants to submit that, let me know. So you kind of decided you have these topic ideas, and now you need to figure out how you are going to turn that into a program proposal. It's really important that you identify, and I always write down, what are things that I already know about this topic? What do I not need to do any research on, and how do I know that I know it? It can't just be because I feel it, because I've seen it work, because someone told me, because 17 students said it was true. I think it's important for you to make sure that you are being a good academic person and looking at the data and trying to figure out what you know about your topic and how you know. And then think about, what about that topic do you think that colleagues would want to know more on? If, for example, you know 17 things about Title IX, there are probably more than 17 things. So what are the other 17 that you don't know? And make a list of those things that you don't know. Try to do some lit review. I think it's really important to be able to provide some context for people. I always feel like it's really important to, as Vicka was mentioning, say, here are some books that you might want to read. Here are the books that we read in anticipation of this presentation. One of the things that I really like to do, maybe you could call it a bribe, I then purchase those books and allow for those books to be somehow distributed during that session. Who has the closest birthday, tagged under the seats, whatever who's driven the farthest. But if you have the means to do that, and you don't always, but if you do have the means to do that, or feel like you could ask your department to pick up that cost, that's a really wonderful way to have folks walk away with something. How can you make your presentation interactive? Vicka was really clear about not wanting to stand up in a room and lecture the whole time. I don't want to be sitting in that room when Vicka is lecturing the whole time. Love to listen to Vicka, but I would prefer some interaction. So it's really important that you try to figure out what are ways that you can make it interactive. Identify your learning outcomes. Very important. While I would say if you need a dictionary, that's not great, but if you want to use Bloom's taxonomy and you want to figure out some different words for your learning outcomes, I'm down with that. Here's something that's really important to me. If you are doing a presentation that is going to be presenting some survey data from the region, please don't send it out in mid-October. If there is a survey that you, because what we do, Vicka said it really well, we submit our program proposals, we wait to hear about them. So summer meeting happens in early June. We wait to hear, and then we say, great, our program got accepted. I don't need to think about that till the end of September. And then in September, I have sometimes received 3 or 4 different surveys that people want me to complete because they need information to present in November. So if you need information, there's nothing wrong with sending out your survey whether or not your program got accepted. Because guess what? This was a topic that you wanted to know more about. So continue to know more about it, whether it gets accepted as a presentation or not. Connection in terms of submitting, connection to conference theme is sometimes more important than you think. Different associations look at that differently, so it might be really important to talk with folks that you know on the programming committee to find out whether or not your title or your connection to the conference theme, how important is that going to be considered in your program proposal. Who is your primary audience? Don't exaggerate. If your primary audience is RDs, say it's RDs. If your primary audience is facility people, say it's facility people. If it's mid-level managers, if it's CHOs. Don't say it's for everybody, and it's really not. Because I can tell you as a senior level person, There is nothing that, kind of can make me wish I'd chosen another session than to walk in and realize that this is not a session that was geared toward me or the things that I'm considering. Consider all the learning styles. Do you have visual learners? Do you have auditory learners? Do you have kinesthetic learners? And do you have activities that will appeal to all the different types of learning styles? And then, can you meet your learning outcomes in the time frame? If you said that there were going to be 4 learning outcomes, is that too many? I think sometimes we think we need to have more than we really do. What are the primary things that you want your participants to know or be able to do when they leave your session, and make sure that you can meet those learning outcomes in the time frame? Presenting for me is one of my very favorite activities. I am more of a read the crowd, wing it. I have always done a PowerPoint. I always have notes, but anyone who's ever presented with me knows that they need to be prepared for me to go off script and off topic depending on what's happening in the room. And the way that I'm able to do that is by being really comfortable with the material that I'm presenting. It's great fun. I hope that everyone that's listening submits at least 2. That's my challenge to you. Thanks, Eric.
Okay, I believe that Shandee is next. Shandee, you can go ahead whenever you're ready.
Okay, well, I'll see if we can get the slide changed here. But first of all, I'd like to say that I feel very privileged to be a part of this panel today. I have done several presentations at GoKuho and other conferences in the past, but definitely have less presentation experience than anyone else on the panel. So I feel very fortunate to be a part of this group today. So Tiffany and I presented together on white privilege and talking about that with students, specifically student staff, at last year's GoKuho. And really how we came to present together is I would really like to echo some of the advice that Deb gave about reaching out to co-presenters, because I really enjoy presenting, but I think my presentation style is really enhanced and complemented by others. And so when thinking about, who do I know who are really fantastic presenters, and I've seen good presentations from them in the past, Tiffany came to mind. And so I reached out to her and said, hey, would you really be willing to present with me? I would love to partner with you on that. And I knew that I could contribute a great deal to a presentation and had a lot of information and knowledge to share, but also that I would learn a lot from her. And so I think if you're interested in co-presenting, look for somebody who you can challenge each other and learn a great deal from each other. So I think how we came up with the topic to begin with was by each brainstorming list of things that we are really passionate about, that we wanted to talk about, but also areas that we knew aren't maybe covered as thoroughly or as much in past conferences that we've been to. And so I think that's where this topic came from, is that it's a topic that a lot of people are hesitant to talk about or hesitant to share about, hesitant to admit that they've made mistakes in this area in the past. And so we really wanted to tackle that part of the issue, and so that's where the idea was born. And I'll let Tiffany talk a little bit about our process from there.
Hi. So like Shandee said, my name's Tiffany Gonzales, and I was Shandee's co-presenter for that. I've also presented a few other times at GoKuho throughout my career and was able to win some top 10s about that. And now that I've been doing some reflection, all of my presentations have been on some sort of social justice topic that are a little bit of a hot topic, a hot button in the field. So maybe that has something to do with the recognition that has been received. So to kind of go through the process that Shandee and I had, and even when I think I'm doing some presentations, is picking the topic. And I know our other presenters have also talked about that, but it truly is something that you're passionate about, something that you think is going to be really interesting to those in the field, and something that you truly can spend months learning about or enhancing what you know about it, and then narrowing down the scope. I know when Shandee and I were talking about this specific presentation, it was one of those where it was like, let's do something that we haven't seen. Everyone wants to know how to prepare for your first job search, and we know those are going to come in, but we might not see something on white privilege, especially presented by 2 women who look and can be identified as white women. So that was definitely something that was narrowing down what are some of the interests that each of us have, and how do we complement that in picking a topic. And then doing a literature review. We did a lot. We looked up a lot of articles. We did a lot of learning. We did, and kind of in my step 2, where our use of technology, we had a shared Google Doc that had all of those articles, and then we split them up. We read them, we did more research, we took notes, and then we sat with each other, and luckily enough, able to be face-to-face about what we learned from that, and just having those discussions and thinking that maybe we were going to say one thing about one of our learning outcomes, but what we learned was something different through what we were able to review in our lit review. And then our shared responsibilities. I think one thing, Shandee kind of mentioned this, is we worked really well together because we were very clear on what our shared responsibilities were, and that right at the beginning of wanting to learn from one another, being able to challenge one another, knowing that maybe my skills in putting a PowerPoint together and making it look nice are a little bit better, and Shandee can at least put the information in there. So making sure it was fair, but also playing on one another's strengths. One of the things that we did was having preparation meetings, is knowing that, like Deb said, you don't necessarily just start thinking about it in October. It's something that should always be on your mind. Making sure that you're enhancing the presentation. So use of video. I was very adamant about having a video in our presentation because we have different learning styles. And there was a time where Shandee was like, do we really need this? And it was like, yes. And then I was able to finally convince her, because making sure we agree on everything, that happens. Making sure you're enhancing it and making it visually appealing to the audience. The one thing I can't stand in presentations is a piece of paper or is on the screen just words. I want to see something. I'm a very visual learner. Using the technology that we have to communicate. I think a majority of people, I'm not going to make assumptions, but have Google, and you're able to use the Drive. You're able to use that so you can both work on the same thing at the same time. And then a lot of our collaboration is we have a great relationship. I think our relationship has become even stronger while working together on this because we did challenge one another. We questioned things. If I had something to say that I thought was great, and Shandee would be like, well, that it doesn't necessarily tie to one of our learning outcomes, and we want to make sure we're sticking to that. Let's think about how we can maybe put that in with what we're talking about. One of the things I don't have on here, but I think is really important, is the follow-up. So once you present at the conference, if you have people who stick after, and I think that usually happens, is they want to talk to you, they want to share their business card, they want to ask follow-up questions that maybe they didn't have time to. I think it's really important that you follow up with those people. Take their business card. I always write on the back like how I know them, so that way when I get back the weeks after the conference, I'm able to send that email, or within a few days make sure they have my presentation, knowing it's available on our website, at the GLCUHO website, but making sure that you're doing that outreach because you never know. They can be the next person you're presenting with.
And so just to jump off some of the pieces that Tiffany shared, I think, and that were also shared earlier, I think the applicability and how you've used what you were talking about in your daily practice is really important. The research and the takeaways are things that people definitely want, but attendees really also want to hear, how did this work in your practice? Where did you make mistakes? Where did you see that the best practices, so to speak, were really effective? And where were they maybe not so effective? So when we did our research, we had a lot of facts and data behind what we were saying, but we were also able to admit where we had made mistakes. We were able to relate it to our personal experience. And I think that was really important and helped people have more of a takeaway. And also to Vicka's earlier point about getting feedback on your presentation, presenting it to others if you're able to, but even in the stages of where we were coming up with a general outline and just starting to build our proposal, I actually got together with some colleagues at my institution who I really respect their views on the topic and the experience that they have, and I ran the presentation idea by them. I said, do you think this is a good idea? Would you attend a presentation on this? And for the most part, the feedback was really positive, but one of my colleagues actually said, no, I don't think it's a good presentation idea because I don't think that's something you can teach. And I was really surprised, but then we had a further conversation about it, and actually the feedback that I got from her and the things that she said about what she would be looking for in this presentation were probably some of the most valuable things in putting it together and making sure that people could walk away with something they could actually use, and addressing some of those points that she was saying, well, here's why I don't think it would work, and then I was able to take that away and make sure that we address that in the presentation. So sometimes the critical feedback you get can be the best in making your presentation better and valuable to your audience.
So it looks like we have a few questions that have come in. So I'll just throw it out to the group, and if you have a response, feel free to chime in. The first question is, did you have anyone review your proposal?
This is Deb. Yes, I typically had more than one person review my proposal for a couple different reasons. One, I am a typo stickler. Yes, I am. I'll just put it out there. And so it was really important for me that whatever I was submitting was error-free. But the other piece is I wanted people from all, like if my audience was RDs, I made sure that RDs reviewed the proposal to say that it was something that they feel like they or folks like them would be interested in. So it was really important for me to do that, yes.
This is Vicka. I didn't have anyone review. I mean, a lot of times I'm presenting with other people, so just sort of through that collaborative process, things are getting reviewed. But I do think when I thought about the topics that I was presenting, I've kind of paid attention to what the themes were, or things that I hadn't seen. I think this was mentioned previously, that you just kind of, what don't you see in sessions. But I did a session once, it wasn't a top 10, on just job searching and whether or not people wanted to do it or should they stay. It was a post-master's folks, so not quite that first job search, but that second job search. So I've been at my institution for a few years, and now I don't really know what to do. And it was just kind of what people were talking about. And so in terms of interest, I thought that there would be good interest in it, and that there was. So I think that, but I like physically having somebody read it. For typo purposes, sure, but for idea purposes, I tend to sort of pay attention to what's going on. Other responses to this question? So the next question is, what advice do you wish you were given prior to writing your proposal?
Vicka, could you repeat the question?
Yes. The next question
I was unmuting myself.
That's okay. The next question is, what advice did you wish you were given prior to writing your proposal?
I don't know if advice, but I wish there had been physical copies of like what a good program proposal looked like. You know, like you typically now have to submit online. So there are sections for sure, you know, like what's your abstract, what are your learning outcomes, but then that whole sort of outline-ish part, I never knew when I first started presenting, do people just want like a 1 through 10 where I would say introduction, discussion, lecturette, small group work, or did you want to know more about what I was doing? So, you know, one of the things that I wish that I had seen was actual like copies of what does a successful program proposal look like. I know that more and more associations are being very clear about the rubric. And so if you are submitting something, look for that and really pay attention to the rubric. But for me, I would have appreciated that.
This is Tiffany. For me, I wish someone would have told me how, and not to make this sound bad, but like how easy it is. Is I always felt like I needed to have the entire presentation, every single aspect of what I was doing by the time I submitted the proposal, and that's not necessarily the case. And so for me, I didn't start putting in proposals because I was just like, oh my gosh, this is going to take so much time. I don't necessarily know if I'm going to have everything. And it's actually not as difficult as it is, as long as, you know, you're, like what we said earlier, passionate about that topic, know a little bit about the topic, are able to do some research, but it's not as scary as I think people think it is.
Thanks. Another question is, as experienced presenters, which presentation type do you prefer, traditional or roundtable, or another type? So I'll give, this is Vicka, I'll chime in real quick. I prefer a traditional type because generally as an experienced presenter, I prefer presentations that are traditional, and as an attendee, I prefer presentations that are traditional. Mostly because I feel like roundtables are pretty up in the air. I mean, there's a lot of dependence on who happens to be in the room, how much information that they happen to have, if their information is correct, if it's transferable. I think roundtables in terms of timing, I think people tend to be a little bit more shy in the beginning of roundtables, and so it takes a while to get them going. And if you're one of the only people from your institution, or you're trying to maximize your conference experience, for me, I want to hear from somebody who has researched it or is familiar with whatever the topic is. And roundtables open themselves up for that to not be the case. And so I think that roundtables are great. I think they serve a good function. But I prefer, to answer the question, probably a more traditional type session.
This is Deb. I am with Vicka. I feel like as a presenter, I am more challenged to do a traditional presentation. And one of the reasons that I present is to keep my skills fresh and to keep my knowledge base up to date so that I'm not being stagnant. And a roundtable to me, while I have participated in a number of them and panels and have won top 10 programs, they are more personal, relational storytelling than information dissemination about a current topic. So they absolutely serve a purpose, but as a presenter, I typically also prefer a more traditional style.
And this is Tiffany. I'm going to echo that, but I also think that the roundtables and the panels are really great in enhancing my experience as a participant in them. So being like an audience member, so I really do. I love the learning that I'm able to do in the sense of a typical presentation. But I always like to kind of enhance my experience at a conference and try to attend at least one of either a roundtable or a panel because I really do like those personal stories, and I feel like it connects me to the members that are presenting a little bit more, and I still do some learning as well. But I would like to mix it up a little bit.
This is Shandee. I think for me, I prefer traditional style in general, both attending and presenting. But I think what's most important when you're putting together a proposal is to make sure whatever you end up presenting is true to the learning outcomes and the abstract that you put forth. Because I think what sometimes gets frustrating to me and to other attendees is when they attend a program that they're expecting to be traditional style, and 75% of it ends up to be group discussion. So I think attendees just want to know what they're getting themselves into and what to expect. And I think that also leads to increased program satisfaction for people who are attending.
I think that's a great point, Shandee. I think, the question isn't, should I present a roundtable or should I present a traditional program? The question really is, what am I presenting, and what's the best way to get this information across the audience? And the answer may be that a roundtable is the best way to get this information across the audience, or it may be that it's a traditional program. So instead of thinking about, well, I want to present a roundtable, but I don't know what it's on, or I want to present a traditional program, but I don't know what it's on, first ask yourself, what am I trying to convey, and what vehicle is the best vehicle to use in order to convey that to the people who are going to be participating. I think we have just one more question, and if you audience members have more questions, feel free to send them in. But we have, at this point, one more question. If you had to summarize the formula for a successful program down to 3 short bullet points, what would those 3 most important points be?
This is Deb. I'm going to go with reflection, preparation, and joy in the process.
I'll chime in. This is Vicka. I would say knowledge. I would say care. Oh, and stewardship. Yeah. Stewardship. Those are my three. Tiffany or Shandee?
Yeah, this is Tiffany. I'm going to say passion, vulnerability, and commitment.
Well, this is Shandee. I'm going to go rogue, I guess. My bullet points have more than one word, but it's still 3 bullet points. So I would say first, what we've echoed earlier, talk about what you know, but then do your research, so supplement it with research, and then as a third point, appeal to different styles in your presentation style. Tiffany wasn't kidding earlier when she talked about how we really complemented each other nicely in putting together the presentation itself, because I don't know why up until this point in my career it didn't occur to me to put some kind of a picture on every single slide. But when Tiffany said that, I realized, hey, that makes a whole lot of sense, because I knew that don't put all your words on the slide, don't read off the slide, throw some pictures in there and some videos. But I think even just the presentation style, I learned a lot from her. So those would be my 3. Talk about what you know, do your research, and appeal to different styles.
Well, thank you, everyone, for chiming in on that. I think that's the last question, so I'm going to turn it back over to Eric.
Thanks, Vicka. You guys all did a great job, and I appreciate your thoughtful feedback. This is wonderful in preparation for putting together your program proposals. That was all the questions we had, so we are going to end the webinar a little bit early. Just as a quick reminder, if you'd like to review the content of this webinar, it'll be posted on our Loyola website under the resources heading. There's a tab there for webinar archives. And if you do have any questions, please feel free to reach out to the Programming and Development Committee. Their contact information is also on our website. Hope everybody has a wonderful weekend.